For years, I watched HOA residents drive across my ranch like they owned it. Every morning, cars crossed my private land. SUVs, pickup trucks, even delivery vans. They used my ranch as a shortcut to avoid the main road. And every time I complained, the HOA gave me the same answer. Everyone has always used that road. But there was one problem. It wasn't a road. It was my private property. My name is Daniel Carter, and I inherited the ranch from my grandfather. The property covered hundreds of acres with open fields, a small creek, livestock fencing, and an old gravel access lane running through one section. That lane had originally been used by my family to move equipment between the fields. It was never created as a public road, and it definitely wasn't an HOA shortcut. But when the neighborhood was developed nearby, residents discovered that my gravel lane connected their community to a major road. It saved them almost 10 minutes of driving, so they started using it. At first, I didn't mind. A couple of vehicles every now and then weren't a big deal. Then it became dozens. Every morning around 7, the traffic started. Cars kicked dust across my fields. Drivers ignored my private property signs. Some even drove around locked gates. I contacted the HOA. Karen Whitmore, the HOA president, told me she would look into it. Nothing changed. Weeks passed, then months. The traffic increased. One morning, I counted more than 40 vehicles using my property before lunchtime. That's when I decided enough was enough. I sent the HOA a formal written notice. I explained that the lane crossed private property and that I did not authorize public access. I asked them to notify residents that the shortcut was closed. Karen responded almost immediately. She said the road had been traditionally used by the neighborhood. I replied that tradition didn't automatically create permission. She disagreed. Then she said something that made my decision very easy. We don't believe you can simply close it. So I did something different. I contacted property attorney and had the land records reviewed. The records showed that the ranch belonged to me. There was no public road designation through that section, and there was no recorded access agreement giving the HOA unrestricted use of the lane. That meant the traffic wasn't a community right. It was simply a habit that had gone on for too long. My attorney advised me to secure the entrance properly, so that's exactly what I did. Early Saturday morning, a contractor arrived at the ranch. We installed heavy concrete barriers at the entrance. Then we installed steel bollards across the lane. They were positioned so vehicles could no longer drive through, while the design still allowed authorized farm equipment to access the property when needed. We also installed clear private property signage. By noon, the shortcut was closed, and the reaction was immediate. The first SUV arrived at the entrance. The driver stopped. He couldn't get through. Another vehicle pulled up behind him. Then another. Within minutes, several frustrated drivers were sitting there trying to figure out what had happened. One driver called the HOA. Then another. And eventually, Karen arrived. She stepped out of her SUV and walked toward me. She looked at the concrete barriers. Then she looked at the steel bollards. Then she looked at me. "What is this?" she demanded. I told her, "It's my property." Karen said residents were being inconvenienced. I reminded her that my property wasn't a public road. She argued that the shortcut had been used for years. I told her that was exactly the problem. Years of unauthorized use didn't magically turn private land into community property. Karen threatened to have the HOA attorney contact me. I smiled. That's fine. My attorney had already prepared the documentation. A few days later, the HOA attorney contacted mine. They asked about the property records. My attorney sent them the title documents, the survey, and the written notices. Then came the question everyone had been avoiding. Was there a legal right for HOA residents to cross my ranch? The answer was no. There was no recorded easement granting the HOA general access. The shortcut was simply a shortcut, and now it was closed. The HOA had two choices. They could keep fighting over my private property, or they could find another route. They chose the second option. The community eventually began using the main road. It added several minutes to their morning commute. For them, it was inconvenient. For me, it meant my ranch was finally peaceful again. No more headlights crossing my fields before sunrise. No more dust clouds. No more strangers driving past my livestock. No more drivers treating my property like a public highway. A few weeks later, I stood beside the new Bollards early one morning. The ranch was quiet. The fields were still. And for the first time in years, nobody was driving through. I didn't block the road to punish anyone. I blocked it because it was never theirs to use in the first place. That's the thing about property boundaries. People can get used to crossing them. They can convince themselves that because something has been happening for years, it must be allowed. But habit isn't ownership, and convenience isn't permission. The HOA wanted a shortcut. They got one for years. Then they learned the difference between a neighborhood road and somebody else's land. And once those concrete barriers and steel bollards went into place, there was no argument left to make. The shortcut was over.